Chapter 17, in which we realize that even detectives need more than just one day to solve a case. I led Kai and Louisa into a corner, invisible to the public eye, as fast as I could, took off their coat and helped Louisa down. Then I took off the helmet, deposited the beer bottle inside, and wrapped the whole thing into my father's coat. 3 9-year-olds walking over the marketplace with a bottle of beer in hand didn't make for a particularly good image. Neither did 3 9-year-olds with a motorcycle helmet. Really conspicuous enough as it was. No one noticed me sneaking the helmet back onto the old schoolyard. Scarf and coat were put back onto the coat hanger in the hallways, without anyone being the wiser, whereas the beer bottle was hidden inside a crate of returnable bottles of brown ale. Dad and Janine wouldn't notice it. Louisa spoke up just after I'd finished cleaning away the traces of our inaugural shopping tour. I take it that it's a bit too late to still visit Mr. Lusher today, proving him either guilty or innocent. I nodded. It's already dark outside. No, we'll have to wait until tomorrow. It wasn't too bad, because that evening my dad actually managed to make time for his children. He presented to us a new game he had been working on. My favorite movie at the time was The Crocodile. It followed a group of teenagers solving a variety of crimes, with significant amounts of high-tension and action scenes, significantly more than we had experienced so far. But then again, all the teenagers in the movie were at least a few years older than us, and the fiction of a movie was always a little different to how things went in real life. And my dad had created a board game that allowed us to play out the crocodile's adventures on our kitchen table. The game board was enormous, and he had crafted the individual characters, the good, the bad, and the so-called abstractors, non-playable figures that moved by chance. Met with an abstractor, for example, the teacher, the player would be sent to detention and had to walk all the way back to the school building. Another abstractor, a policeman called Mr. Bugelfart, forced the player to go home, and yet another one, a chef called Mr. Crumplesauce, forcibly invited your character to have dinner at his restaurant, leaving you suspended for the upcoming turn. We played for 3 hours, or maybe even longer. Dad played the bad guys and criminals, and the 3 of us played the crocodiles themselves, and after long turns of back and forth, we won the game. That evening, Louise, Kai, and I went to bed exhausted from both our real and fictional pursuit of crime, though, as you might suspect, Louise and I didn't fall asleep instantaneously. Instead, we waited until all the noise from Dad and Janine had died, and the house was quieter than a tomb. Then we snuck out into the balcony, and really, Mike had been waiting for us, a large pink tongue hanging out of her mouth. She squeezed herself through the crack of the door as soon as I opened it, and jumped on the further end of my bed. Well, laughed Louise, let's see if this is going to work every night. Soon after, the 3 of us were fast asleep. We woke up much earlier than the day before, and smuggled Micah back onto the balcony first thing in the morning. Already standing in the middle of the glass-paned veranda room, we suddenly noticed my dad to be present as well. The veranda didn't only serve as a connection between the second-floor hallway and the balcony, but also as a storeroom for board games like the one we'd played yesterday. My dad crouched in front of a closet, sorting something into the lowest shelf, with only the closet door separating us from his view. Lucky for us, he'd already opened the balcony door for airing purposes. All we had to do was silently and quickly push Micah outside. She sat down like she'd spent the entire night gazing longingly at our house. We left the veranda, unheard and unseen. All we heard was in fact my dad's voice, presumably after he had uncrouched and closed the closet door. "Oh, I didn't see Micah here before. Let's close the door before she gets any ideas to try and sneak into the house." I made an audible poof sound. That had ended fairly well. After having eaten breakfast, we gathered back into the workshop and continued on making plans. Kai picked a newly bought bottle of beer from the crate of otherwise empty delay bottles and pressed as many parts as he reasonably could onto an ink pad. The bottle itself was put onto a basket, because we didn't like the idea of opening carrying alcoholic beverages to the streets. We left the house, taking care to not entirely close the workshop door. We preferred being able to enter the parsonage whenever we wanted, without Dad or Janine tracking our every movement. Mr. Lusher didn't live terribly far away. We passed Mr. Clubman's demolished store on the way to his house. He was still working, though by now he closed the destroyed window with a large sheet of plastic, and even through that sheet we barely noticed the leftover traces of ash. He offered a friendly wave and lifted up the coffee pot Kai had given to him. There was no doubt he was simply cheerful in nature. Louisa pointed out just that, and he answered with a smile, pointing towards a small porcelain pot next to the store's front door. "My friend," said Paulus, "be happy at all times." I was about to ask if his friend Paulus collected porcelain pots too, until I realized that Paulus was probably referring to yet another figure from the Bible. The weather was still unusually mild, the temperatures almost warm, and there was no way we could have missed the obvious swell of the Michel when we crossed one of its countless bridges. After a heap of snow we noticed on the side just yesterday seemed to have magically disappeared overnight. It's so nice outside, Kai. I'm sure Mr. Lasher took the opportunity to do some sunbathing in front of his lawn. We got lucky and Kai was right. Mr. Lasher and his father sat in front of the house, his father reading the newspaper while his son actually nursed another bottle of beer. It was nearly empty. We acted like we were casual passerbys. It wasn't like we could just walk up to him, only to stop and take a closer look at him and his beer bottle. Chapter 17, in which we learn not to offer alcohol to an alcoholic. "Good morning," I called politely. "Sup," answered an impartial Mr. Lasher. His father didn't even look up from his newspaper, and I remembered what my dad said about him being deaf. "Please excuse me, we don't wish to bother you," continued my dialogue, and stood still in front of the garden gate. "What do you want from me?" asked Mr. Lasher, a little more interested in the conversation than before. "We're collecting returnable bottles," said Kai. "Returnable bottles, you know, to stock up our potty money to buy a little more candy at the supermarket."